We're talking about content repurposing hacks with AI this week, and we have some, I think, good examples that we're going to talk about through this video, through this week's live. And as we dive in, I just want you to, if you're watching, to realize that we're talking about mainly ChatGPT, right, Jana?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think some of the things we're going to talk about probably could work with other non-GPT based technology as well. But I personally am only using ChatGPT at this time. I mean, obviously there's other AI that comes in different places, but that's where I go to do my writing, repurposing, etc. So yeah.
Got it. Okay. I just want to make sure people know that we're mainly coming at it from the standpoint of we're using ChatGPT for the majority of these. But as I've said in other videos, like Canva Magic Write has some capabilities with my templates for like Pinterest descriptions or whatever to use those same templates. I did try to use Bard this week, and I did not feel like it is the same kind of output as what ChatGPT does.
Yeah, I haven't used it, but I've heard the same thing from many people that it just doesn't feel as intuitive. Not intuitive to use, but as like an end user of software, but more like intuitive. Like it doesn't seem to be making the same leaps that ChatGPT seems to be able to make when you ask it to do something. You know, it doesn't seem to be able to infer what you need it to be able to process in the same way.
Yeah, I put a prompt in and I asked it multiple times to give me a Pinterest description for a pin where ChatGPT knows what I'm talking about. And sometimes it does like give me blog post-esque type content. ChatGPT does.
Yeah.
Every single output Bard gave me was like an exact description of what I was telling it to do. Like it was like writing a blog post for me instead of a description for a pin.
Yeah.
So anyways, I thought I would mention that because if you are using Bard in some of these repurposing things we talk about today could probably work there because of the output it's doing, but at the same time, they may not work in the same way. So
yeah.
Okay, let's start. Where do you want to start?
Okay, so I was thinking a little bit about this, and I think that the biggest like AI writing tool or ChatGPT hack that I think is like kind of like the like the Mac Daddy of all the hacks, the hack daddy, the hack mama, is, and this is also I feel like the one that is sort of, if you don't do this, it's the source of frustration for a lot of my students. So like inside of HLC, high leverage content, my system and course, we do use ChatGPT. It's optional and you can use it in the course or you cannot. It's up to you. But people who do give it a shot often come back to me or into the Facebook group that I provide support for the course and say like, oh, it didn't work. You know, it didn't give me what I wanted. And when I talked to them a little bit about it, the thing that they're not doing, which is like the big Mac Daddy hack, is they're not asking it to make changes to what it created the first time. So basically they're putting in a prompt. Sometimes it's based on like a prompt that I've given them that they fill in the blanks for, you know, from inside the course. They feed it into ChatGPT. They fill in the blanks, so to speak, like Mad Lib style. And then they don't get back what they want. And they say, oh, it didn't work. And they kind of say like, okay, this isn't going to work. Right. And if like anyone who uses ChatGPT a good amount these days and feels like they are getting good results from it knows really well this hack, which is that you have to almost always, I almost always have to ask it to try again. And what I often end up saying back to it is, I really liked this, this, and this of what you gave me, but I didn't like this and this. And I want it to include this and this and this and talk about this. Try again, please. You know, I always say please and thank you with the stupid robot. I just do. And I think, you know, I mean, that's kind of a joke. People make a joke about that, but I think there's something about remembering that you can talk to it like a person. And so when I say please and thank you, I think it's almost like a good reminder for myself and for my students when they hear me saying it in my tutorials inside the course, for example, that you can kind of think of this almost like you're speaking to a person. You can say, the same thing you would say to like a virtual assistant or a content creator that you hired to create a piece of content for you. You can say, oh, I liked this, this, and this about it, but I didn't like this. And I want you to incorporate this because I forgot to tell you that, right? But the great thing about ChatGPT is even like with a virtual assistant or someone who we've hired as a content creator, we know that we only get 2 rounds of revisions, right? Or we know that it's only the appropriate thing to do our very best to give that service provider as much detail about what we want as possible up front before they start the project. Because that's just respectful, and it doesn't mean we're perfect, but we do our best to give that person everything they need. You don't have to do that with ChatGPT because it's not a human, right? So you can literally ask it to redo something like, an infinite number of times till the cows come home. Now, do we want to do that? No, because we're trying to save time with it, and we don't want to sit there for 3 hours trying to get something that would have taken us 2 hours to write, right? And there's a whole conversation about whether it's worth it to invest time to learn how to prompt it properly and prompt chain, which I think it is, because then you'll get faster at it. So it's like that little bit of it's a learning curve, but we don't want to have to do that all the time, but you can do it. And I think most people, the biggest hack to me is just remembering that it's not likely to give you what you need perfectly the first time. And you can you can give it more information and ask it to try again. And you can give it real time, almost human-like feedback and ask it to do it again. And you can do that for as long as you want. There's no concern about it getting tired or annoyed at you, especially if you say, please.
Well, I have noticed, and I don't know if this is just a glitch within the GPT, but sometimes when I get a piece of feedback, when I give it a piece of feedback and then I get a result and it's not what I want, and then I try to give it feedback again, it's almost like it's only going off of the very last thing that it said, and it's giving like it's just continuing down this rabbit hole of terrible. So you have to like give it more context. Like I don't like, you can't just say I don't like that.
Right. That's
Give
not
me
helpful.
more.
It's like that wouldn't be helpful for a human either.
No. So you have to go back to the original and be like, give me more of this, and like copy and paste it into the results again. So then it can actually understand what you're asking it.
Yeah. And I think that that's another hack really, is like, think about it. Like if you're a good problem solver as a person, you're probably going to be really good at learning how to chat GPT prompt, because it's really about solving problems. So if you start to notice that it's going down that path, I've seen that happen before too. I will actually tell it, I didn't like this part. I did like this part. I forgot to tell you this part, da, 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 and I want to make sure that's incorporated. This, and this. I want you to try again and make sure that you follow all of the instructions from this thread, not just the message that I'm leaving you now.
Ooh.
So whether or not that's going to work perfectly, it doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. I've noticed that if it starts to get in that kind of weird, like looping spiral.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And inside ChatGPT, it's a thread. They call it a thread, I think.
Thread.
Right. Yeah. I think, am I getting that confused with threads? No, I'm pretty sure. Is it it's one chat or one thread? I think it's one thread, or maybe it's one chat. It's been a while since I looked at that terminology, but we can find out which one it is and use that. Like, make sure you take into consideration every piece of instruction I've given you in this thread when you try again. Okay, go ahead, try again.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like problem solving. Like, what would I need to do? And again, it's like, we have to remember, it's funny because it's like straddling this line. It's like helpful to think about talking to it like a person.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have to remember that really what it is it's simply, all it's doing in the background, it's not processing the way a human processes. It's just predicting text.
Yeah.
Right. It's only predictive of text. Another thing I know sometimes that gets my students a little bit bogged down, but then we fix it, is that they'll see me prompt it in a certain way, and then they'll do the same exact prompt, but they'll plug in like their variables, and they don't get anything similar to what I got. And they're like, how is that possible? And the reason is that like I mean, I don't even know the reason really. I can't speak to the ones and the zeros of it, like the programming piece of it, but you're not always going to get the same thing. It's giving different versions of things each time. It's always processing things in a different way, but with like from the perspective of it's just predicting what text would come next based on your prompt. I don't know if I'm making sense. Does that make sense? Maybe you can figure out a better way to describe that.
No,
I don't know what you're talking about, Jana.
no, I think it makes sense in that if you want a good output, you have to have a good input. So if you start off with a really poor prompt, it's going to give you really poor feedback. And if you give it really poor feedback based on what it's giving you, based on what you gave it, it's just going to be a cycle of really bad feedback. And you're not actually going to save time or create content that you really want to create for the people you're creating for.
Yeah.
So you have to really back it up and make sure that the prompt itself is really good.
Totally.
Very detailed. My prompts, and I don't know about yours, and please tell me what yours generally include if you feel called to. I recently, let me get there. I recently started making ChatGPT prompts, and by recent, I mean like I started back over the summer. But I have these prompts now, and I have a whole library I've started. I think there's like 27 to 30 different ones in there. And it's like different ones based on like social media and content planning and like Pinterest and just customer journey mapping. But what I like to do in all of my prompts, and I include this in all of them, are actual rules that I want it to follow. So I tell it things like at the end, like, please mix in clean humor. Don't repeat yourself. Please avoid using exclamation marks. Please don't use adjectives X, Y, and Z. Like, I like to include these things at the very end so it has like something to follow, and actually I don't have to do a lot of self-editing.
Yeah, it's almost like a style guide. Like a little mini style guide that you're popping in there to give it that extra. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
It's a great hack. So basically you have that stored somewhere and you just copy and paste it in along with whatever specific instructions you have for today for this prompt. Yeah, it's really smart.
Yeah.
There is a place in the paid version of ChatGPT where you can add all that stuff. And so it'll automatically consider that for all your threads unless you turn that function off, which is also can be really helpful. And you can also put, anything else you want in there, like who your ideal audience is that you speak to, and what your offers are and what your main, you can even put like your core values. I've found I put some core values in that spot in ChatGPT. And I find that a lot of times when it gives me something, it'll sort of like at the end of the output, it'll say something like, positioning your whatever this way, we'll do this, this, and this. And it's a good reflection of the your value of quality over quantity, or, things like that. Like it shows me at the end of the output that it considered my core values that are in that section of ChatGPT in the settings when it was putting together the output, which I like a lot. Yeah. And then I was thinking with the predictive text thing, just going back to that, because I feel like I did a crappy job trying to explain that. I couldn't put my finger on it. I was like, where else do we know about predictive text? And I was like, oh, keyword research. So, so anyone who does Pinterest keyword research, especially, but also even with like YouTube and Google to some degree. We don't probably rely on this as much with YouTube and Google because we have like third-party tools, but with Pinterest, we do this a lot where we're relying on predictive text. So if you think about going into the Pinterest search bar and putting in some letters, Pinterest is going to fill in the rest of it with what it thinks you might be asking for. It's basically saying like, if you type in the word bread and a P, it's saying like, oh, maybe you're looking for bread pudding recipes, because most people who type in bread and then a P, the vast majority of people who type that in want bread pudding recipes. So you're like, oh yeah, that is what I wanted. Thanks. Or you're like, no, that's not it. And you keep going. ChatGPT is basically doing the same thing, but like on steroids, as fast as, comparing like that is like a snail compared to ChatGPT doing it you know, like at the speed of a race car, right? Or faster than we can even perceive. So it's really, if we think about it this way, yes, it's like you can talk to it like a human, but at the same time, all it's doing is predicting text based on how much it's analyzed already on the internet, which is a lot. So if we think about it that way too, I think it sometimes helps with the mindset of remembering that that's what it's giving us. It's just predicting text, you know, it's just a machine.
Jules is back with us again this week. She's finishing a baby quilt
Ah,
for her Etsy
so
store for
fun.
Black Friday, which I think is fantastic. And B, she says, I always have to tell ChatGPT not to start the hang on. I just have to click a button. Okay. I always have to tell ChatGPT not to start the product description introducing to make the post sound fun. So I have that problem too. It always likes to use these, and I was actually reading some examples to my husband in the car line the other day when we just dropped our kids off, and he was talking about ChatGPT and how his friend was talking to him about it. And I was like, well, let me just tell you what ChatGPT spits out for me, and you can tell me if this sounds like a machine, because he knows nothing about Pinterest or this world that we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So he's more of an outsider, and I feel like I can rely on what he's saying, right?
Yeah.
So I read him some, and it's like, it's like that introducing or discover or elevate or inspire, and those are the first words it's starting with, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I would never say that.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, if you notice that's happening a lot, like you said, you can say, you know, you can put it in your rules, whether that's in the, you know, the settings or in the chat. Please don't start with the word introducing. Or you can also just take what it gives you and just zhuzh it up a little yourself too, right? You can just know that you're always, you know, going to have to remove the beginning of introducing and come up with some other ways to say that. And this is something that I use ChatGPT for all the time, is I'll take something like that and say, like, I want you to give me 10 more versions that start with a different word that don't include introducing. And then once you have those 10 versions, if you like any of them, you can always sub in that one, or you can sometimes sub that in. So maybe another version that you like better is, I don't know, like, you're going to go, you know, bonkers in a good way over this new offer or this new, you know, that's silly, but whatever it is that you like, you know, you can get some more ideas for those sort of boilerplates and just, you know, use those and just fit what it's giving you into the boilerplates that you get used to using over and over in your product your product descriptions.
Like, wrap your body in this handmade love of a quilt.
Yeah, that's so good. Yes. Who needs ChatGPT? We have HGPT. We've got Heather Farris GPT.
Yeah.
That's so good. Yeah,
What's
it's
on
just,
your
you know,
list?
I don't remember. Let's see what else is on my list, perhaps.
What else is on your list?
Oh, you know what? I think I closed it out. Oh, hold on a
I
second.
have
I think I
it,
closed out my list.
but you need to open it so you can look at
I
them.
will open it. Let's see. But yeah, I think that's the biggest hack, you know, is knowing that you can keep asking it over and over to try again, and that you can speak to it like a human, and you know, talk to it like you're delegating something to it, because you are, you know.
Yeah.
And just remembering the other side of that coin is remembering that, you know, you don't have to just be like, either it's not a ultimatum. You don't have to either use what it gives you the first time or give up and throw your hands in the air. Like, there's a lot of other ways you can use what it's giving you. Okay. A couple of things, like, just tactically speaking, like, one thing I like to use ChatGPT for is cleaning up transcripts. So again, this is something where it takes a little while to figure out how to prompt ChatGPT to get this to do it the way you want it to be done. But I do a lot of like transcripts, like I'll transcribe like an interview from one of my micro audio summits, or I used to transcribe a lot of our Clubhouse rooms when Heather and I were doing Clubhouse a lot.
Yep.
And then you can take that transcription and you can put it into ChatGPT and ask it to clean it up. And so I like to say, like, please don't change any of, like, please don't, I want you to clean this transcript up and make it more readable. Pay attention to improving the syntax so that it's more readable for someone who's reading it. And I'll say, like, please don't paraphrase. Instead, you know, stick to the original words, but simply clean it up to make it more readable, so that it's not like trying to, flower up the language or anything. It's just using what you have and making it more readable. You can use that as an alternative. I mean, I also love Descript for taking out the ums and the ahs, but it'll take out the ums and the ahs. And it'll just like make it so that because the way we speak, like just I'm doing it now, I'm kind of like not finishing a sentence and starting the sentence over again. The way we speak, we speak in like run-on sentences, but that's not how people want to read something. So you can even say that to ChatGPT, like take any run-on sentences and turn them into more readable sentences, things like that. So I find having a prompt up your sleeve that helps you ask ChatGPT to clean up a transcript can be really helpful. So that's one.
I really like taking ChatGPT and having it summarize blog posts for me that I'm reading from other people.
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it'll like summarize and like give you the main points and like action items or takeaways.
Yeah. That's a great idea. It's and just to be clear, it's not a content repurposing hack. We're not trying to repurpose other people's content as our own. You're just talking about just a way to help.
Just for myself.
Right. To use ChatGPT to learn and digest things you're learning. I love that. That's a great idea. And do you like the one that I was just, as I was talking about that prompt that I used to get it to clean up a transcript?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you have something like that in the ChatGPT prompts that you have.
I don't. I
and you could add it. But is your ChatGPT prompts is a document that you give away for free? Is that correct?
Some of them, yeah.
Okay.
So I have a set of like pin titles and descriptions and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's all Pinterest related. And then I have one that I give away that's a Pinterest trends, like how to use Pinterest trends and your Pinterest keywords and then come up with additional pins to make.
Using ChatGPT?
Using ChatGPT. So
I
give
that's right. Okay.
Sets of prompts away. And it's a lot of different prompts. I think there's 4, 8 or 9. So it's like 10 total.
Okay. So we'll make sure we put that freebie that people can get access to just for free in the description of this video after we finish it. And then is your larger bank of ChatGPT prompts, is that inside the membership?
It's in the membership, but I also just set it up for sale. So I can put that link in the description too.
Okay, perfect. So it's some people can buy it as an individual product, or they can join the membership and access it along with everything else. Okay.
Yeah. If they want all the prompts that are in there as of now, which is like 27 to 30,
mm-hmm.
I have it set up for $5. And then if they want like ongoing updates, then they need to join the membership.
Got it. So if you get it for $5, you get what it is now, but you don't get the growing library. Okay.
Correct. It's either $5 or $7, but I'll get the link and you guys can decide what you want to do with it.
Okay. All right. Do you want me to talk about another one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So another one that I like especially for repurposing, because we're really talking like AI for repurposing content, is asking ChatGPT for idioms and metaphors and then using them as a hook. So
you taught me to do that actually in a Clubhouse room. You were talking about it or something a while ago.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. So the reason I like this for repurposing is because a lot of times we have something that we've said, we know it lands well, like maybe we wrote an email about it, or maybe it's something that we said once in a presentation and it stuck, and it's one of those things we talk about a lot, but we want kind of a fresh spin on it. So if you write if you put something in ChatGPT, and I have these prompts inside HLC as well, but basically I don't mind talking about them for free because, like take what you can and use it and run with it. And then also add to it and make it your own as well. But it basically, those prompts are like, here's like an email that I wrote to my list, or here's a section of my blog post. I want you to give me 10. You can either say idioms or metaphors, or you can just start with idioms and then do another chat with metaphors that describe, what I'm describing in this section of the blog or something like that. Or you can say that describe or are thematically related to this section of my blog, or are you could just say, or related to, and it'll give you some, and then you can look at them and you can say, okay, 10 more, please. Okay, 20 more, please, right? You can always ask for more and more and more and more, and you can look through them and you can use those as like part of a hook for repurposing that section of the blog. So you freshened it up a little bit. Now you can use it like on like that, like as a social media caption or something. And the reason I like using little metaphors and idioms and hooks, there's kind of two reasons, and they're sort of related. But one of them is that like people's brains just like them. And so like having those as metaphors and hooks, people can kind of like, because they've heard them before, like the definition of an idiom basically is like something that people have heard before to describe something else. I'll give you a couple of examples in a minute. So it captures people's attention, and they're also like almost like little mini stories. And so they actually fire off the same, little like synapses in our brains as when we're listening to stories, when we see metaphors and metaphors, well, similes too, but metaphors and idioms that describe, certain ideas that we're describing in that piece of content. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. I'll give you a couple of examples. Let me just pull them up so that to make sure that this actually like makes sense to people. I'm going to pull up my ChatGPT. So for example, like if I'm talking about, let's say I have a section of my blog where I'm talking about like early adoption of a new social media platform or just a new platform in general. And I put that in there and I say, give me some idioms that are, thematically related to, this post or this section of my blog. And ChatGPT says the early bird catches the worm. Early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. I would never use that second one, but the first one is good. Another couple that are on this list that I really like I'm skipping over a bunch that I don't like, which is totally what's going to happen. Like you're going to get a bunch of crap, but in among the crap, there's a couple that are good, right? So success comes to those who start early. Seize the day, carpe diem. I really like this one. Time and tide wait for no man. And I might even update it to say like time and tide wait for no woman, because I think that's, that's fun and kind of on brand since we work mostly with female entrepreneurs as clients and students. So giving, getting some of those ideas, I think is it for me, I've never really been able to think of those on my own, but ChatGPT can give you like as many as you could possibly, want, and you can use those in your hooks and then just, repurpose the section of the blog where you're talking about that idea as the caption for your social post or your email or wherever you're repurposing that content to. So I just like it. It's like bringing a lot of like color and interest to your writing. And you can use that hack for just, writing things the first time too, but I think it's great for repurposing.
Oh, I like that. And I think it gives people more ideas of how they can create content for their audiences. Because sometimes I get really stuck in what to create, but I already have this big bank of content that people love. So then figuring out like even what's worked in the past and using that example to come up with new ways.
Yep.
It's like we've talked about before, we need to talk about content topics over and over.
Totally.
Sometimes we just need to hear them from a different way.
Exactly. And, there's nothing wrong with repeating your content the same way, but it is nice to also freshen it up so that your audience is still hearing the same messages from you. It's still consistent, but this time they hear, carpe diem or, same thing with metaphors. Like here's one where I asked it to come up with idioms and, this is idioms too, but related to long-term thinking in business and marketing. And it said, planting seeds for the future, playing the long game. We hear playing the long game all the time. That's boring. But Rome wasn't built in a day. Slow and steady wins the race. Like these are all ideas that I wouldn't necessarily have thought of with my little brain,
Yeah.
So my little limited brain that can't process predictive text at the speed of a race car.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing though? Like you can literally come up with stuff so quickly and have content out so much faster. I love using ChatGPT to create blog post outlines for me. And I actually did a video on the YouTube channel about that. And I paired it with my Google SEO strategy of how I get my blog post to rank on page 1. So then having ChatGPT help me to create the outline for the content that will connect with my strategy for SEO.
Really good.
Really like doing that.
So good.
Mm-hmm.
Where is that prompt? Where can people get their hands on that
Oh,
or on that training if they want to learn that from you?
it's just on the YouTube channel, so I'll get the link for the description.
Okay.
Totally.
Really good. Yeah, I use ChatGPT for part of the outlining process. So inside of HLC, I teach what I call my 4-step light and logical content creation process. It's for long form content. And basically the way that I do it, the signature system that I teach in there for doing it, this 4-step, light and logical, we use ChatGPT in 2 of the steps, but not in the other 2. And this is kind of the way that I've learned to like increase your productivity with writing and make writing a lot easier. Because we all know that the best thing about ChatGPT, if you learn how to use it the right way, is that you no longer are staring at a blank page cursor. Like we all talk about that all the time, but it's like, even for people like us who like to write and are creative and whatnot, it's still better, to start with something than nothing. Right.
Yeah.
So we use it, in certain areas, but then also in other areas, we lean more into other tools. So I have like we use more, I have like a thought leadership checklist that we lean into in other phases. So all this to say, the point I'm bringing up here is that, and you've heard people say this before, I'm sure, but it's good to remind people during this chat that we're having that it's all about that balance, between using the tool, but also making sure that you really are infusing your own thought leadership into it for all the reasons, whether it's SEO reasons or just because, you want to be an ethical human reasons, or that your your stuff's not going to sell. Oh no, are we going to get in trouble on YouTube for that? That your stuff's not going to sell if it sounds like everybody else's, like all the reasons why we need to make sure we're finding that balance, right?
Yeah. No, I love that. And anything that comes out of AI tools for me, I always edit it. In fact, I did a review video, and this was before Tailwind even started asking me to create content on their behalf, because that's been happening a lot lately. And
so good.
I created a YouTube video about Ghostwriter back in the spring. And part of the thing that I said with that conversation in that YouTube video was anything that AI spits out, you should edit it to have your own voice and your own context and all of that. And I got a comment on that YouTube video from the founder of Tailwind and the current CEO saying, I totally agree with you. Thank you for bringing that, having that conversation in this YouTube video and telling people this is a great tool, but you do need to edit the content that it spits out at you.
Right.
So I really appreciated that.
Yeah. And I'm sure they appreciate your perspective on it too, because I mean, just to strip it down, if you run Tailwind and you are encouraging people to use this Ghostwriter tool inside Tailwind, which is great, and people are using it and expecting it to be perfect without editing it, there's going to be a lot of missed expectations. It's going to miss the mark more often than not if we're defining missing the mark as it's not perfect.
Yeah.
So they're, for them over there, they're probably like, whew, exactly. Thank God people get it. We didn't design this to give you something perfect.
No.
We designed this to get you 95% there in the case of Tailwind Ghostwriter. Most of the time, with ChatGPT, I always say it's going to be 40% there, maybe 60% there if you're really good at prompting.
Yeah.
With Ghostwriter, I say 90 to 95 because and we've talked about this before. I think Pinterest pin descriptions are the perfect place to use AI because nobody reads them.
No.
Nobody reads those suckers. So why not go for it? But still, you still want to make sure it's not embarrassing,
Ghostwriter does spit out some stuff that's just sounds stupid, though.
Of course it does. All AI does, because it's just predicting text. It's not making any kind of human judgment about whether this makes sense or, maybe a little bit it does. It is sophisticated, but it's not human judgment. I guess it's able to somehow mimic human judgment, but only to a certain degree.
All these AI tools are now coming out with the ability, you mentioned ChatGPT's ability to set rules and stuff and personalization if you have the paid tool.
Yeah.
Which you can do some level of that with the free version too. It's just down in your settings. Tailwind just rolled out this week the ability to set up a brand voice profile, and
Nice.
also Canva did the same thing recently. So they're all coming around to be able to give more
Yeah.
context to the
Yeah.
tool from your
Which is great, but
perspective.
that just means instead of getting 40% there, it's going to get 50% there.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
instead of getting 60% there because you're really good at prompting, it's going to get you 70% there. Like
Yeah.
it's still not going to be the be all end all. So
Jules says, wow, I need to use ChatGPT for video outlines. I made a video Monday and didn't have outlines and ended up sending a couple of those to the trash. I get it, Jules.
right.
I do, yeah. So what I would say is keep it really streamlined. And when you do use ChatGPT, it's going to try to add in a bunch of fluff. Just get rid of all the fluff. And then as
Yeah.
you're editing your video, if you're like, this isn't necessary, if you say something twice the same way, back to back, or even 2 times, just get rid of one. Like, just keep it so simple, especially for videos.
Yeah. And my thought on that too would be like, don't just throw it. Like, you don't have to throw it away just because it's bad. You can actually say to ChatGPT, this is bad. And here are the 3 reasons why this is bad. And what you need to do to make it better, try again.
Yeah.
Right? Like give it a shot, give it another shot at doing it. And, now that you see because sometimes we don't know what to tell it to do until we see what we don't want it to do. You know what I mean? It's that contrast. Sometimes you need to see what you don't want in order to be able to articulate what you do want.
And then, so Jules didn't use outlines. She's saying she's going to next time, I think. She says tomorrow's another day. Using it for outlines, I think, is a really great place to start, actually, because then what you're actually getting from ChatGPT, it's just an outline, and you're going to be adding your own content in there anyways. So you can quite literally use what it gives you. What I meant is just remove any of the fluff, because it's going to try to give you like 12 points that you need to cover. Like, you don't need to cover all of that to create Texas Star on your quilts. You just need to know maybe like the placement, like what is the one thing you want people to take away from this video, and just create a small outline. Hook, body, call to action. That's your framework. And then just fill it in.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that the takeaway too is that, like, again, we're talking about finding that balance. Like, either you're going to use it to outline and you're going to use your own human brain to fill in the outline, or you're going to use your own human brain to do the outlining and then you're going to ask ChatGPT to fill it in.
Yeah.
Like, those are both legitimate ways to do it, and you could experiment with either way. But where people get frustrated with the tool, it's when they expect the tool to be able to do the outlining for them and the filling in, and it's like, okay, but you need to bring your own brain.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, as we've discussed many times, like, it's not going to be a reflection of your brand. It's not going to sell. No one's going to want it or see any connection of it to you, because again, none of it's from your brain, So I personally prefer, and this is how I teach it, to have your brain do the outlining and then ask ChatGPT to help draft each section. That's just how my brain thinks. I want to actually do the outline, because I find if I ask ChatGPT to do the outline, it starts off really generic, and then it's like there's no going back. Whereas if I outline it and I say, here's the unique way I want to talk about this topic, these are the things I want to include in it, then it knows better how to fill that in. You know what I mean? And again, it's still not going to be perfect. But that to me is the best way to go, from like getting lots of generic outputs to getting outputs that are specific to your opinions, your values, the way that the angles that you take on the things that you teach and talk about in your content.
Love that.
But we're in like a content creation thing, and we were really talking about repurposing. Sorry.
That's okay. We can always change this title later.
Oh,
We're not married to it.
That means you'd have to do another thumbnail, though.
Oh, yeah. Those have been a bane of my existence lately. It was even happening on my YouTube video this week I posted. It wouldn't add. So
Must be a glitch, right?
it is. Yeah, I need to report it, but I just haven't had time, because I don't have time to sit in their chat queue. Okay, one of the things that you texted me earlier is actually something that I have a similar thing in my write-ups, like in my prompts. And as my prompt, I like to build, okay, let me back up. I like to build multi-layered prompts in order to get the best output from ChatGPT. So when I'm creating a content calendar for YouTube, I will layer in another three prompts total. So the first prompt is the content calendar prompt. And then I add in a second prompt, which is similar to what you've sent me. You said craft a why story and then ask ChatGPT to break it down. I actually craft an about me. I had ChatGPT help me create an about me prompt that's finalized, and I stick that into the beginning of the prompt. And then at the end of the prompt, I actually give it my customer personas, which I also had ChatGPT help me to produce. So it's like a multi-layered thing. And then what it actually spits out to me is actually closer, and I don't have to do as much editing for the actual content plan. And then within the prompt, I'm telling it like what my focus is for content ideas or what my pain points are for my customers and my viewers. So then the content plan isn't exactly the same that it created for me before, if that makes sense. Because my pillars of content are always the same, but the pain points and the marketing and the messaging that I want to use to get people to whatever I'm talking about changes month to month.
Yeah.
So that's one way that I like to repurpose existing like commands in the business.
Yeah. So you're talking about actually repurposing prompts. So it's like you have a boilerplate prompt that you're using for your content plan for the month. And you just need to tell it like which personas you want to be speaking to and what the main theme is. And because it has your prompt, it knows like what your content pillars are. So it can fill that in a meaningful way. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So you're talking about, that's a strategy to use ChatGPT to develop your content plan for the month.
It spits out pretty decent content plans too.
Yeah. And again, the great thing is like, you know, it'll give you 10 things and you might like 2 of them and you just say, great, 10 more. Okay, 20 more, you know, and then eventually you get enough that you have 5 that you really like. And you discard any that just are off brand for you or you don't want to talk about or don't make sense. Although one of the great things I love about ChatGPT, and also one of the reasons, like one of the ways I teach people to use it in my course, is to remember that even though things in there that it may give you, your brain wants to dismiss them because they don't sound fun to you or you feel like you've covered it already or whatever, just watch your brain, because sometimes ChatGPT is giving you that thing because it's analyzing what people are talking about on the internet everywhere. And so some of that stuff, when people complain like, oh, it's just generic, it's like, yeah, but if it might be the thing that people actually need and want, and you might just need to use it, but bring your own special sauce or your spin to it. So I think it's easy for us to look at it and be like, oh, it gave me 10 ideas, but I'm just going to use this one that feels fun.
It's the same philosophy of having a beginner's mind.
Right.
When you approach a new topic to learn about it, or you approach a topic again, if you and I'm super guilty of this, like really guilty of it. But if you approach topics from, I don't
know.
If you approach topics from, oh, I already know that, then you're less likely to get the benefit of what someone's talking about from their point of view.
Right. So just to connect these 2 ideas in case anyone's watching now or later and is like, what are they talking about? Like, what's the connection? It's like, we tend to think that if it's a really beginner topic, that because we already know it and we learned it many moons ago and we've talked about it in our content before and it's just so basic, that we would rather spend time, you know, thinking about and teaching about things that are more advanced. But in fact, that basic thing is actually what your audience really needs and needs more of, and more people in your audience need that, because it's something that, you know, we're always a step or 2 ahead of our audience, or 10, you know?
Yeah.
And so when ChatGPT gives you a list of 10 things you could put in your content plan this month based on what Heather's describing, which is like her ideal persona, her ICO persona, you know, the pillars, the theme, if she looks at those and she dismisses the ones that feel too basic to her brain. And sometimes I hear a lot of people saying, oh, ChatGPT gives you such generic stuff. It's like, is it generic or is it basic? Like, let's be a little discerning about this and think this through and make intentional decisions.
That's a good
So we're
point.
way off the repurposing topic, but one of the, and all this to say that one of the benefits of using ChatGPT as a brainstorming tool for your content is that you can tap into this like what are people on the internet asking or talking about? You know what I mean? Like what are the basics? Because sometimes it's hard for us as more advanced people to identify and remember what the basics are. But ChatGPT always seems to be able to deliver on the basics because it's like, here's what everybody wants. Here's the generic answer or the generic topic, but it's generic or cliche for a reason, right? So
a really good video or a really good blog post that you actually have on this topic is should you start a business account? Yeah, you.
Oh, yeah.
Should you start a business account
That's an
or
old blog.
keep your keep your account or whatever? And so that's a really good example. And then this week I published a YouTube video here on the channel about whether Pinterest will work for your brand. And I feel like that's so basic for most people, but the way that I broke it down, identifying, is your awareness content there? Is your consideration content there? Like, are these specific kinds of buckets of keywords there for you and your brand, and how to find them helps people to answer that question on their own. So now if someone asks me a question like, hey, how do I know if Pinterest is good for my brand? I don't have to follow that up by being like, well, send me your website. Send me your offers or tell me what you do. And I don't have to then troubleshoot that for them and tell them. I can just be like, you know what? Here's a really good video. You should watch this.
Yeah, totally. I had
No, I was going to say you have one more in your list that I wanted to ask you about, but you go ahead.
I was going to say something super off topic, which is basically in a nutshell that Jamar Diggs, who is an awesome YouTube strategist, who was in the most recent edition of my micro audio summit. Heather was also a expert speaker in that summit. Jamar was one of the expert speakers. Heather was one of the expert speakers. He and I had a conversation about creating YouTube videos as a resource for not only your free community, if you will, but also even for your paid community.
Yeah.
So it's a really good conversation about using it in that way, like leveraging it that way. And you do a really good job with that on your channel.
Thank you. Joel says it may not be basic to a new listener. That is right.
Yep.
Someone new to you, maybe in the beginning. So what was on your list is craft a why story. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, this is, again, thinking about AI content repurposing hacks. Most of us have taken the time, and if you haven't already, I highly recommend that you do it. It's not always easy from a mindset perspective, but it's a really, really high leverage activity to write out a why story, basically to write out a story, whether it's a blog post. Sometimes you might even find some of this on your About Me page. But I like to think of it as a piece of long form content. It's one of the pillars that I think of as long form content that talks about your story, about why. So it's, why did you create your offer? Essentially, like what happened in your life or your business, or and it doesn't necessarily have to be like a big aha moment you had in your own personal life. It could be. And for a lot of coaches, for example, who I work with, health coaches, it often is something where like they learned something the hard way and now they're teaching others to help others avoid that, that learning curve or whatever. It doesn't have to be like that. It can be, more simple. For me, for example, my old why story about Pinterest was essentially just like a more exciting version of, I started working with Kay. Kay was using Pinterest. It was kicking ass for her. I was like, oh my God, I didn't know Pinterest could do this. Yeah. Here's the kinds of results she was getting. I learned all about it. I went all in. I took courses. I did this. I did that. I, developed my own framework. I took on other clients. It's just, that's the why story there. So it could be something big and dramatic, or it could just be, what happened to give you your crown, basically. And then once you have that written out, you can give that to ChatGPT and bookmark that chat, and go back to it anytime you need to write something about yourself. Right. So if you need a bio for a podcast episode, or you want to write a couple of different versions of your bio for your media page, or you're redoing your about page, or you need, I don't know, maybe you're starting a Substack. Say that 5 times fast. Starting a Substack.
Started one recently.
Yes, but did you say it 5 times fast? you know, you can always, instead of having to sit down and reinvent the wheel and rewrite yourself a little bio, that's annoying because nobody likes to write about themselves. It's like the worst thing to have to write about.
I have one bookmarked. I literally just update it every year.
Yeah. Yeah. But you know, sometimes we did need different versions or different nuances of it, or like my why story, I don't love it. I might rewrite it at some point, but it's basically like the 4 reasons why I created high leverage content. And so I can give that to ChatGPT and say, hey, I need you to write like a bio. And ChatGPT doesn't do a great job with like using it like 100 words or whatever. It doesn't do a good job with understanding, which I've never understood, but whatever. But I could say like, you know, please emphasize the part where I, you know, was being asked by my Pinterest clients what they should pin in order to get clients. Like, you know, I can have it pull out pieces and emphasize pieces in smaller versions of it from your larger like why story. So you start with your why story, feed it into ChatGPT in a thread. If you don't have the paid version, you may need to feed it in as like part 1, part 2, part 3, and then revisit that same thread anytime you need a new version of that why story for a different place. If you're speaking in a summit and they need a bio, then you want it to be related to the topic, you know, things like that. So it's a good way to repurpose content with AI.
Like that. Okay. So I think that was the majority of what we wanted to talk about. Do we want to recap or no?
I don't know if I can.
I don't know if I can either.
AI content repurposing hacks.
So
yeah,
we did talk about cleaning up with a transcript, asking ChatGPT for idioms, layering prompts, and repurposing previous outputs or prompts into new prompts to help expand and get better outputs. The why stories, so you can create about sections or bios for interviews and things. And then the mistake that you said was, tell us.
Yeah, to me, that's the biggest AI hack, is just remembering that you don't have to just be happy with the first version that it gives you. In fact, if you expect going into it that you're going to be happy with the first version, you're never going to be happy. Like, you're not going to be able to learn how to use this tool to save time and do better in your business. Yeah, I mean, that's it. Like, you're almost never, even if you get really good at prompting, you're almost never going to go in and get it right the first time. So just don't be afraid to ask it to make specific changes. Tell it why you didn't, you know, what parts you didn't like. And then the magic words are try again, you know.
I have one final hack example that I just thought of, and then we're going to close this out. One thing that I started doing recently was figuring out in what brand voice I like, or I write in the majority of the time. So I actually took content from one of my sales pages and some content from blog posts and about pages, just various places across the internet where I've created content. And I gave it all of those examples and asked it what tone and voice I write in. That way I can help ChatGPT in future prompts to write in that tone and style, like style and tone of voice.
Yeah.
And I found that really helpful.
What did it tell you?
It told me, I actually ended up sticking this into Canva, right? So I'll tell you exactly what it said, because it's right here in my brand kit in Canva. It said, brand, my brand, empathetic and supportive with informal and conversational tone, using slang terms like IG to appeal to younger audiences or those already familiar with social media. And then in sales copy, it obviously told me that I prefer a persuasive writing style. But supportive and empathetic is like exactly who I am.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
I love that it pulled that out.
Yeah, love that. I love that for you.
I love that for you. Well, we're off next week, but we will see you back here the following week. So no show on 11/23, but on 11/30, we'll be back again. The gals will be back, and we're talking Pinterest SEO mistakes.
Ooh. All right.
That one's going to pop off. I have a feeling.
Yeah. And we're going to save a lot of people a lot of headaches.
Yeah. So, all right, well, bye for now. Okay, I will send you, I already sent